All right, well, welcome everyone to today's, or this month's monthly Lunch and Learn session. It's great to see so many of you here today. My name's Mick Reedy. I'm the Head of Delivery at DiUS in Melbourne. And today I have the pleasure of introducing today's talk on Flutter, the mobile cross-platform ecosystem that we are increasingly getting to know and really like. And today we're hearing from Mike Hughes, delivery lead at DiUS and founder of the Flutter Melbourne Group. And his talk today will be on dark mode versus light mode on Android, iOS, and beyond. Mike will be covering some of the common cross-platform challenges and sharing how you can address some of these when working with Flutter. Following his talk, he'll be doing some Q&A, so please maybe just hang on to your questions until the end. So without further ado, I will hand over to Mike to talk about all things Flutter.
Great, thanks Mick. I'll just share my screen. Okay, welcome everyone to this talk about Flutter dark mode versus light mode on Android, iOS, and beyond. And doing a talk about light and dark mode, I couldn't resist just doing this animation. A little bit more about me, just to kick off. Yeah, I've been doing Flutter development on mobile for about 3 years, and I founded Flutter Melbourne just because I was so interested in it. And where it actually started was my interest in finding a framework that could do full native and yet give me really, really good results, just like fully native apps. Okay, so the audience for this talk is really everybody. I do have code in this talk, but I'll talk about the concepts as well. So if you're a mobile or a Flutter developer, this would be really great for you. But also UXers and designers, there's definitely things in here for you to learn about. And generally, smartphone users in general will probably pick up some stuff that they perhaps didn't know. So just a really quick deep dive on light and dark mode first, probably a few things you don't know about light and dark mode. So dark mode is a pretty big deal, or it's becoming an increasingly big deal. Originally, dark mode was pitched for eye strain in that it provided better usability and readability because of higher contrast and reduced luminescence to lower eye strain. That was kind of where it started, but it also became evident that there were significant power savings for OLED screen devices. So OLED is a self-emissive display technology. So when it's showing black, it's actually not emitting any light. So by having generally darker themes and darker colors, you're actually emitting less light from the screen or OLED screen and therefore saving power. But probably the thing that's emerging as the biggest reason to do dark mode is it's very, very popular with users. So here's what is dark mode exactly. Here's an example app, the light mode and the dark mode. Things you should know first is that light mode's in effect the default. So before dark mode came along, in all those years prior on mobile, all we had was really light mode. Most apps had a light theme, a light background, and dark text. But now we have dark mode, which is effectively inverts a lot of that. Something else to know, of course, is that sure, apps need to support a light and a dark mode. But the other thing to note is that the operating system, iOS or Android, actually still draws some of the things on screen, like the status bar at the top or the nav bar at the bottom for Android. So keep that in mind because that's a key point that we'll discuss as we go through. So this talk will primarily focus on mobile operating systems, but I will cover some of the other platforms towards the end. So on iOS and now iPadOS and Android, iOS got dark mode in the operating system around September 2018 and Android around September 2019. although there was a dark mode in Android version 9 in August, and even pre that in Android version 8. So what we're talking about here is this is when the operating system directly supported dark mode. Prior to this, apps did in fact individually occasionally support a light and a dark mode or multiple themes, but this was the point at which light and dark mode became a thing because the operating systems, iOS and Android, got the support in the operating system. So looking at iOS and iPadOS, this clip on the right is just showing you how you go into settings and actually manually select either a light or a dark mode. So at the moment it's light in this clip. We click on dark and it immediately changes the interface to a dark mode. So that's through settings directly. The other way to set dark mode is you can set it on automatic, which basically means that based on your local time zone, the phone will switch to dark mode at sunset and go back to light mode at sunrise. You can also schedule this beyond sunrise and sunset if you actually want to. The other way, and probably the most common way to set light and dark mode on an iOS device is you use Control Center. So swipe down from the top right, and you'll see there's a toggle. That bottom toggle just down here is the light dark mode toggle. So when you hit it, that's now indicating the phone is in dark mode, and that's operating system wide. The other thing to note too is that Apple is leaning really hard into light and dark mode. So now on iOS 14, we have a lot of the wallpapers have a light and a dark mode. So if the phone's in dark mode, you'll see the dark version of this wallpaper. But if the phone's in light mode, you'll get the lighter version of the wallpaper. So this is something that turned up in iOS 14. The other thing as well is widgets. So here on the right, you can see there's a couple of widgets. There's a couple that are light in color. So if the phone changes overall to a dark mode, then these widgets will also change to a dark mode. So Apple's not also promoting light and dark mode in apps and the operating system, but also things like widgets and wallpapers and things like that. So they're really leaning on it hard. So what does Apple say we should do around light and dark mode and developing your apps for those? Apple believes in only selecting that light and dark mode from the settings. So Apple encourages the selection of light and dark mode in settings and not in the app. And that's their rationale below. They believe that users could get confused if you actually set or can set a light or a dark mode in different places, both the app and in settings. Android is ever so slightly different. So here in the clip on the right, you'll see that I'm actually using the toggle, what is known as quick settings in Android, to actually change the Android operating system from it's light at the moment, bingo, I just hit the toggle, and then now it's in dark mode. So it works very, very similarly in Android in that you can go into settings, pick display and pick the dark theme, but most people just use this toggle in quick settings to do it. Similarly, you can also schedule it in Android to change modes on sunrise and sunset. Although I must say that the different vendors like Samsung phones, LG phones, other vendors do have slightly different interfaces in their settings. So what does Google say about light and dark mode? So Google's design system is material design, and they recommend something slightly different to Apple. So Google recommends that you present these three options to a user inside the app. So that's in addition to the settings. So Google, in effect, is suggesting you can change light and dark mode in the app with these three settings that you should present to the user, or system-wide from settings. So Google and Apple have two slightly different approaches here on how you present light and dark mode to users. So insights. So dark mode has been around for 2+ years on iOS and Android, and so it's not new. The operating systems do treat them slightly differently, but they, in effect, work largely the same. Apple and Google are leaning in hard, especially Apple, and users really like it. But the one rub from all of that is, of course, designers who are in the audience. Now we're going to have to start designing for more than one mode. So how do we actually do this in Flutter? So my first question when I started using Flutter and was looking at light and dark mode is, well, can I do a Flutter app just as good as any app that is a fully native app? So on the right here, we have the OzPost Android app. It's in dark mode, and just going through a few of its screens, its map, etc. So it does support dark mode quite well. There's the light mode. So it's going around again. That's the dark mode launch screen. That's the app in dark mode. That's the map of the app in dark mode. And then we change the phone back to light mode, and bingo, it goes back to light mode. So looking at the track screen within the RigiDig OzPost Android app, you'll see that between the two modes, there's some common colors. So apart from the background and the text changing color, you've got things like a common red, but between the nav bars, the same green on delivered. But notice there are some colors that are changing. So we've got a brown here, but a slightly lighter orange here. So light and dark mode isn't just changing the background and the text color from dark to light. There are other things involved. So here's an example of a map. Again, the map itself is light versus dark, but a lot of the other colors are the same. So common between both modes. Another thing to note too is that, like I mentioned before, Android is suggesting changing or presenting an option for the user to change modes within the app. So these two screens are from the OzPost Android app. It has a dark mode tile in settings here and the prompt to allow the user to change them. But in iOS, there's no such thing. So in this case, the OzPost app is actually following both the Google and the Apple guidelines. In Android, show a dialog to the user and allow them to change it in app. But in iOS, nope, don't show it to the user in the app. It's only set from settings. So the default Flutter app. So Flutter apps by default only come with one theme, which is the light theme. But as we said, if we want to get Flutter apps up to the level of normal native apps, then what we actually want to do is make sure that we've got light and dark mode theme switching, which means we need two themes. And we want to make sure that if we set the theme of the phone from outside of the app, that the app follows. Okay, explicit styling. So this is examples of Flutter code, and you'll see in Flutter code that this is often done the case with early apps, is that the styling for the app actually is hard-coded. So things like this particular color, this particular size, this particular background color. The other thing to know is that what we want to get to is implicit styling. So themes kind of by magic. So if we look at this code here, we can see that we have an app bar. It has a title, but at this point, there's no color here on this widget. So how do we style this app bar? Where does the color come from? Where does the font come from? Where does the style come from? So this is an extract from the documentation from the app. And as we can see in this section at the bottom, if the property is not specified, i.e. is null, then we get the colors from what this thing in Flutter called a theme or theme data. So that gives us a clue as to how we can actually style Flutter apps using this feature within Flutter known as a theme. So platform mode change. So what we're going for here is how do we build support into a Flutter app so that if we change the theme in the operating system, that the app reacts accordingly. So I'll provide two example apps during this presentation. This first one's called the minimum app. This is just 2 lines of code changed from the default Flutter app to actually enable this light and dark mode setting. So if we look at this clip on the right, it's in light mode. We're pushing a button to push the counter up. We go into Android, change the app to dark mode, and bingo, the app goes into dark mode straight away, and the count wasn't lost. So that's actually what we want to do. So how do we actually do that in Flutter code? So if you're a Flutter developer, you'll love this, but I'll touch on the concepts as well. So effectively what we're doing here is adding a default theme, which in this case is a light theme. We add a dark theme, which is a different instance of darker colors. But the key here is this property that allows the Flutter app to follow whatever the system is setting in terms of theme. So this is the bit that enables you to go in, change the theme on your phone at the operating system level, and then have it reflected in the app. So what is a theme? We keep talking about it, but what is it actually? I like to compare it to Microsoft Word. Everyone knows Microsoft Word. You've got all these styles for normal text, heading 1, heading 2, etc. Themes in Flutter are kind of exactly the same thing. It's an abstraction of things like color values, style values, and other information that you just abstract out so that you don't have to hard code them. So how do we do theme styling in a Flutter app? So instead of using values on widgets directly, we abstract away to a theme. And then because we've extracted away to that theme, we can change it dynamically on the fly. And that allows us to change any given screen from light to dark and back again constantly. Now, the way we do this, so this is the same code snippet as before. What we're showing here is that we've got an app bar, it's got some text, but we're jumping up the Flutter tree to look at this style known as headline 4. So this is the crux of adding this theme styling into the app. And here's the definition of headline 4. Headline 4 in the theme just says it's 18-point, product sans, this is the font weight, this is the color. So in terms of looking at what's a theme actually look like in code, here's an example of theme data for a light theme and theme data for a dark theme. So they may look the same and they go way off the bottom of the screen. So there can be a lot of hard-coded values in a theme in Flutter, but primarily there's only a few changes between the two. So the light theme is using red colors, the dark theme is using green colors. So that's just to give you an idea of how we represent it in code. So next, moving on a little bit more, the maximum app. This is probably the other example app I'll show throughout this presentation. How do we actually string together some of these things and actually implement complete light and dark theme in an app? So this particular app has a light and a dark theme, but it also has a user interface to allow us to present to the user and choose which theme we want to do. And this is actually from Android, so we're choosing a light theme, a dark theme, but at the moment we're saying, you know, whatever the operating system says to do, I'll follow that. So looking at that a little bit closer, this is what the light theme looks like. So it starts light, we go into the picker, so it starts light, we click on choose theme, we see that it's system controlled at the moment, we change it to dark, so the app changes to dark, and bingo, the colors change. So on the flip side, that same app in dark mode, so in this case the phone's in dark mode, so the app starts in dark mode, you can see that it's controlled by the system, then we force it to light mode, and bingo, the app changes to light mode and then back to dark again. So this shows, particularly in Android, you can get this mix of the app determining the app theme, light or dark, and then also the operating system can override it as well if the app allows you to do that. So another piece of the puzzle is the launch screen. So when Flutter apps start, there's a very small period where the Flutter framework is loading. And in this case, it's the underlying platform that's drawing this screen. In Android, this is the first activity in effect. So for this particular Max app, there's a light version and a dark version of the launch screen. So we can build a Flutter app to say, when the app launches, whatever the operating says the theme is, light or dark, display the launch screen in that theme. So these screenshots on the right are just of the real Android app from Australia Post, and they're two examples of the light launch screen for Android and the dark launch screen for Android. I should also mention at this point too that every Flutter app actually has, every Flutter project has an Android project and an iOS project embedded within it. So in this case, to modify my Flutter app to have a different colored launch screen, I need to change some of the Android specific files. But these are not files that I add to the project. They're already in the project. I'm just going to modify them. Similarly for iOS, because the iOS project is embedded in the Flutter project, you can just open Xcode for your Flutter project and actually change just one setting to say, have the launch screen background follow the system background, be it light or be it dark. So for those of you who know Android really well, there's a few changes to the Android manifest.xml file. But as I said, this file already exists in your Flutter project by default, so you just make a few changes. Similarly for styles, there's just a few changes to get the launch screen for your Flutter app to follow whatever theme the operating system is in. So another piece of the puzzle are the system bars. Now, these are drawn by the operating system, Android or iOS. So in iOS, it's just the status bar at the top. For Android, it's the status bar at the top and the navigation bar at the bottom. So how do we make sure that they're following the theme of the app and the system? So the way to do this in Flutter is you use an annotated region widget, which basically just says, I can apply this system bar style to this Flutter app. And I won't go too much into this code. For those of you who are Flutter developers, I will provide some links at the end, which are the repos for these example projects, so you can go and have a good ferret through the code when you get a chance. So in this case, the annotated region is just calling the system overlay style, and in this case, we've got styling for the status bar and the nav bar. So it's pretty straightforward from a Flutter app to also style the status and the nav bars. So on Android, as I mentioned before, Google recommends presenting a dialog within the app to actually give the user the option to change the theme. So how do we actually do this, create this dialog? This is pretty straightforward. I won't go too far into this code, but basically you just create this theme picker dialog, which in and of itself is also themed. And it basically has values to allow it to change theme based on a user picking an option in that dialog, or if the user changes the theme at the operating system level from outside of the app. So just to look at that. I'll show you a demo of that a little bit later, actually, as we get into the mature app. So the mature app, so what is if you pull all these bits and pieces together, do all these things in a Flutter app, what does a mature Flutter app actually look like in light and dark mode when all these things are enabled? This is an app I've been working on for a little while. Bear in mind, it's still in development. There's still the odd bug here and there that I haven't quite cleaned up, but you'll get the idea. So the clip on the right is just showing the app starting in dark mode and some of those screens. We'll do a demo of this app shortly. So there's a couple of other things that I should talk about because there's still more pieces to the puzzle. So one of the things that we know when we build mobile apps in any framework or platform, we've got assets. So when we have the app having a light and a dark theme, we need to consider, do all these assets and the colors that they have, for example, images, does that actually work in each of the themes? So looking at this particular mature app, you'll see that this Flutter logo built with Flutter is slightly different between the two versions of the app, light theme versus dark theme. So what we do need to do is have the ability to pick the right asset depending on which theme the app is in. So here's just some example of some code. We just use a ternary to basically, when we're building this widget, to say, look, if I'm in light mode, use the light version of the asset. If I'm in dark mode, use the dark mode version of the asset. The other thing that does pop up when using Flutter as well is that Flutter has plugins where it's leaning heavily on the underlying Android or iOS SDKs or APIs to actually draw things on screen. So this is an example of a Flutter app that is actually using Google Maps. And in this case, the Google Maps is a plugin in Flutter, which means that the underlying Android or iOS SDK is actually the one drawing the map on screen. So you'll see a light version and a dark version here. So how do we handle the fact that it's not the Flutter code that is drawing the map and therefore needs to change color, but it's actually an underlying SDK? How do we handle that? So this is where we get into sort of some of the much more advanced Flutter stuff. We have to override some methods. So the key methods in this case are widget binding observer and did change platform brightness. So what we're actually doing here is the did change platform brightness is the method that will be triggered when it detects the operating system from outside the app did actually change the brightness. So this is the thing that detects the change. And then in the case of Google Maps, we need to make a custom Google Maps controller call to actually then style that map to light or dark, depending on what the change was to the theme. So if you have any plugin in Flutter that uses an underlying mobile operating system SDK and it draws to the screen and you need that to also change theme, then this is how you do it: widget binding observer and did change platform brightness. So at this point, I'll just give you a bit of a demo of this mature app and kind of what it looks like kicking around the screen. Okay, so this is just my personal phone. So you'll see as I'm touching everything on screen. So in this case, the phone's in light mode. So the app opens in light mode, shows all the light mode things. But in this case, I'll go into the quick settings, change the entire phone. So I'm changing the theme from outside of the app, and bingo, the app automatically and immediately restyles itself to dark theme and stays there. So this is just an example of the app running in dark mode. But say I'm not happy with that, I can change it back to light mode, and bingo, it's back to light mode. Lots of screens in here. I won't go through them all, but one of the more interesting things is the dialogue that we talked about. So this is running on a Pixel 3 XL, so it's an Android phone. So as per the recommendations, I actually need that theme picker widget to present to a user to allow them to change the theme. So here it is. It's currently set to system default. So if I change the theme at the operating system level, it'll follow. But I can also do something like, okay, I want to force it to be dark. So we go in there, you'll see the theme in the app set to dark. Now, if I change the phone to light, the phone's in light. No, the app stays in dark because I told the app to stay in dark. So at the moment, the operating system's in light theme, the app's in dark theme, and the app setting always overrides the system. But if I change back to system default, the app picks up that the system's in light mode and changes the app to light mode. So that's reflected all throughout the app. and in this case, even the map as well. So as an example, go to dark mode, and bingo, the app's in dark mode. So that's just a quick demo of a mature app in Flutter doing all the dark mode and light mode things. That's good. Got through the demo without any crashes. Great. Okay, but what about the other platforms? So some of you may have heard that Flutter does other platforms. How does light and dark mode work on those? So just a quick note about desktop operating system support. So these are the actual operating systems themselves. Windows, Mac OS, and Linux all got their own light and dark mode on these dates and on these builds. So yeah, if you're an operating system, having a light and dark mode is kind of becoming mandatory. So that's the desktop operating systems themselves. So what I'm going to show you is just a quick demo. I've recorded it just in the interest of time. This is actually my Mac, and it's running the Max app that I showed you before. But at this time, I've compiled it to be a Mac OS native application. So this is running on my Mac as a Mac OS application. Now, desktop support for Flutter is currently in alpha, but it still works fine. So I'll show you that at the moment. So this is the app currently sitting there running in Mac. And here is the Mac OS dialog for changing themes. So let's just see what happens. So here I'm going into the app, which is a Mac OS app, changing or showing that it's system themed. And I go into Mac OS, the operating system, change to dark mode, and bingo, the app changes to dark mode. Then go back into the app, change it to light, so it overrides the system. No, I don't want that. I want dark. No, I don't. I want system controlled. And now we go back, and bingo, the theme of the app is following the system again. So that's just a quick demo of a Flutter app compiled as a native Mac OS app, has full support for Mac OS light and dark theme and changing from outside the app. So what about web, which is another platform that is currently in beta for Flutter. So Flutter can build native web apps as well, and that functionality is currently in beta. So as of late September 2020, so it's pretty recent, all these browsers on all these operating systems picked up Flutter support for changing to light and dark mode. So let me talk that through a little bit more. What I'm talking about is a browser, say Edge, running on Windows. If I have a Flutter web app running in that configuration, will it do light and dark mode? And the answer is yes, and I'll show you how that works. But as you can see, it's across a large number of the core browsers across pretty much all the desktop and mobile operating systems. And the reason this works is because all these browsers on desktop or mobile operating systems themselves understand whether the system is in light or dark mode. So again, here's a video of a Windows 10 machine. And what I've done here is, again, using the Flutter Light and Dark Mode Max app, I've used Flutter to build a Windows native app. So it's compiled as a Windows native app. And a Windows native web app. And it's running in, I believe I had Firefox and Chrome here. So there's two browsers, two different browsers. And this is a Flutter web app running in each of those browsers. And over here on the right is the Windows 10 dialog for changing the operating system theme. So let's just have a look at that. So here we go. Windows 10 is in light mode. We change Windows 10 to dark mode. The browser itself, you notice, just switched to dark mode. But what happened to the app? So the app was forced to light. We change it back to system controlled, so it follows the browser and the operating system. And bingo, the app's in dark mode. Go back into Windows 10, change Windows 10 overall to light mode. You see the browser changed and the app itself changed to light mode. So, and again, one more time, change it to dark. the browsers and the apps themselves are following the operating system, so they change to dark as well. So this kind of blew my mind when I first tested it out, because what's happening here is the setting for light or dark mode from the operating system, in this case Windows 10, is triggering the browser and letting the browser know that it's in dark mode. The browser changes to dark mode, but then the browser also triggers the app itself, or the app listens to the browser and knows when the browser has changed to dark mode, and then in turn changes the app itself. So this is a bit mind-blowing that this actually all works, and works really well. So I guess in summary, Flutter supports light and dark mode, and it uses the theme functionality in Flutter to do that, which is supported really, really well in Flutter, I have to say. The theme can be set by the platform from the operating system level or by the user inside the app. Flutter also supports all these fringe cases. So automatic mode selection from outside of the app, yep. Does it do launch screens before the Flutter framework starts? Yep. Does it do the system bars? Yep. Does it do things like plugins that use underlying SDKs to actually change themes? Yep. So I guess the summation in the end is that Flutter is as good as any other app in terms of implementing light and dark mode, and it really has no limitations. This is just a list of resources for those of you that want to actually look a little bit deeper. These first two links are to my app repositories. So if you're a Flutter dev, go to those repositories. You'll see they're set up for not only mobile but desktop support in Flutter. Build them, run them, play with them, see how the code works, and yeah, really embrace and have a bit of a look, deep dive on how Flutter light and dark mode works and how all the theming works. And similarly, just a couple of the main Apple and Google resources. These are things you really should look at if you're considering light and dark mode. And on that note, I might throw to questions. Does anyone want to pipe up and just speak out loud and ask any questions?
I have a question, Mike.
Yep, shoot.
Does Facebook have dark mode?
Okay, so the one thing I didn't talk about in all this presentation, partly because of time, was all the apps that have dark mode. I actually had slides in for this, but out of the, say, top 50, 100, 200 apps, a really big chunk of all those apps has a dark mode, and you'll see apps popping up more and more with dark mode. So Twitter has it, Instagram has it, you name it, realestate.com has it, Ozpost has it. It's popping up absolutely everywhere. But to answer your question, Aaron, yes, Facebook's been a little bit late to the party. They've been testing dark mode for quite a while, because we know that from beta releases, but I believe it's being rolled out right now. So if you go and have a look at Facebook and you set your phone to dark mode, what I think you'll find is that Facebook will change to a dark interface. I will say one more thing about Facebook too. It looks like the way Facebook's implemented dark and light mode, they've ignored the Apple guidance not to give a theme picker dialog inside the app. So once you get it, if you go in and have a look, you can actually override the operating system theme in the Facebook app with that dialog picker, even though it goes against the Apple guidelines for what they should be doing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Cool. Anyone else got any light and dark mode questions?
I've got a question, Mike.
Shoot.
Great talk, by the way. My question isn't actually about light and dark. It's about how much code did you have to change to get the app to run on the phones as compared to the desktop and the web?
Not much. So as you know, Trevor, the Flutter instructions to enable web support or enable Linux desktop or Windows desktop or Mac OS desktop, literally it's like 2 command lines and literally, I'm trying to think if I changed any code. If you go and look at the Flutter Max app repo, I think you'll find that there's actually no code changed. I just needed to configure my Flutter project to support Linux desktop, Windows desktop, Mac OS desktop, and web desktop. So Flutter projects start with Android and iOS projects within them. But to add those desktop operating systems or web support, you have to trigger a config flag to add it to your project. It was really quick.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mike.
Cool. Anyone else have any other questions about light and dark mode? Anyone want to try and ask me if any apps specifically have dark mode, and I'll see if I can tell you. No? Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I guess thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Hopefully you learned something new, not just about Flutter, but a whole lot about light and dark mode on mobile and other platforms. And I believe you'll get an email this afternoon with this video shared from someone at DiUS. So on that note, I might finish up there.
Thanks a lot, Mike. That was really good.